When we answer challenging questions in our PDHPE classroom, we might use a scaffold to guide us. I'd like to show you how to use the scaffold on screen to develop a response to a question that you may receive within the question box. So the question that we're going to focus on is, do you like sex and what does it feel like? So looking at the first question as part of the scaffold, does this question require you to revisit your class contract or your guidelines? Yeah, it does. And it's important to recognise this so that students understand that they need to think of other ways to ask personal questions. So the example response might be that you say, someone's asked a personal question and we've spoken about not asking personal questions in our class contract. So let's consider, can you rephrase from the personal to the global? As teachers, it's important that we model to students how to rephrase from personal to global. We can't tell our students in our guidelines not to ask personal questions without showing them another way of asking. Plus, this also allows us to respond to questions that we might have dismissed in the past because they were personal. So we might say, I'm just going to rephrase this question to, does everyone like sex and what does it feel like? Are we able to include some of the key messages or create a teachable moment from this question? Wherever possible, we should try to embed the key messages. Here in the example response, you can see that we've tried to include messages around consent, safe sex, and along with a positive message about communicating with partners. So our example response might be, what's important about sex is that both people want to do it, that they look after themselves and their partner, and that they communicate to one another about what feels good and what doesn't feel good. So are we able to model how to answer private questions with this question? So again, we need to model that private questions like this are not appropriate for public forums such as a classroom. Some students just don't understand the difference between private and public questions, or questions that they should or shouldn't ask in a public space such as the classroom or online. And you've got an opportunity here to teach them the difference. So we might just simply say this type of question isn't appropriate for a public discussion like this. Is there an opportunity to address what the question's really asking and recognise the possible reason for asking the question? So often with questions that students ask, particularly some of the challenging ones, there's a hidden meaning. For this question, a student might be asking because they've just had or are thinking about engaging in sexual intercourse, or maybe that they've had a negative experience, or they're wondering if they are the only person in the world who didn't like sex. We need to make sure that we're sensitive to all global possibilities and that if we take a global perspective in how we respond. So we might simply say, how sex feels is different for different people. Some people like sex and others don't, and that's okay. Saying that it's okay not to like sex might even help out a student at ease if they have experienced a negative situation. And in terms of the last question, are you able to refer students to resources, website support, or use reflective questioning back to the class? One of our other key messages is about being able to refer students to reliable information or support. This might be in the way of recommending websites or might be providing information that's in a local health service. So it might be that we say if anyone wants to know more about this topic, they can go to the PlaySafe website, which is a New South Wales government website, for more information and to see what other people ask about sex. Sometimes you might feel that a question's too sensitive or controversial for you to answer in detail in front of the whole class. So this scaffold consideration allows you to provide detail for students with other places in which individual students can access to find out more or to get further support. Now keep in mind that we wouldn't expect that you'd be able to use every example given here in one response to this question. And until you've had practice with the scaffold, you wouldn't be able to develop each part of the response, particularly for answering any question live with the students. But it's about using the scaffold to stick to the key messages as your basis. So with this example, you can consider in each of the points and select which ones which are most appropriate for your students and which ones suit your own personal style of teaching and responding to questions, and then you can go from there.